I'm very excited about to start off with our guest tonight is Taylor Frazier McCollum, a proud native of Washington, D.C., who was raised in Landover, Maryland, where her journey as an activist began at a young age, including becoming the president of the District Heights Youth Empowerment Program at just 15 years old. During her college years, Taylor's political activism expanded as she took the streets of Florida to canvass for Barack Obama. But following her graduation, her dedication to progressive causes led her to join the Green Party, where she advocated for environmental justice, social equality, and social equity. And as a devoted mother, she looks forward to continuing her advocacy at the local level by working with her child's school PTA in the upcoming school year. But Taylor's activism is also deeply rooted in her local community. What we are talking about tonight is a petition Taylor launched to prevent the construction of a data center in her beloved hometown of Landover. That petition now has over 21,000 signatures, and she has her sights set on one day holding a political office. But Taylor is driven by a desire to create a more equitable and sustainable world for all. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring Taylor on. I'm excited to have her here. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. So thank you so much for coming on tonight. We're excited to have you here and to get to have this conversation. The work you're doing is really inspiring and really important for people to hear about. So thank you for coming on.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to get started and start asking a couple of questions. So one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later tonight is a poll that came out by the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And one of the things that it says in that poll is that a lot of people are really upset and really worried about AI, but 51% of Marylanders are worried about the environmental and energy impacts of data centers on their communities. So I wanted to throw that out there and as a number that is relevant to the work that you're doing and get your thoughts on it. What do you think about that poll that's showing that people are worried about this?
Yes, the poll was conducted very recently, so I think that it's right on time with where we are as a society as a whole, because data center expansion is happening and exploding all across the country. So it's not just a fight in Maryland or Landover. There's fights in Arizona, in California, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, Louisiana, all across the country. So I feel like this issue is something that's very important to people. And the more they're learning about the environmental impacts of data centers, the more they are against the expansion and the footprint of data center expanding into their communities.
Yeah, and I think the poll coming out and showing that right now probably confirms what you're sensing on the ground and things like that. That a lot of people are worried about this right now, and that it is a thing that is not just a flash in the pan news story. I think people have real anxiety about what these big tech companies are trying to do to their neighborhoods.
Yes. Another major concern was surveillance, because of our proximity to DC and the existence of NDAs between data center companies and the local governments. We don't even know what type of data center is proposed for the Landover site. We know the size and the scope of the data center, but we don't know what company they're working for. So I think that's another thing that we're all concerned about, is just like, who's going to be using this data center, because of if Palantir or one of those other type of organizations is going to be using it. I definitely don't want it in Landover. So
Right, because
it's very
it's
unfortunate.
not just the environment and the energy issues. It's what it does to the local economy. It's what it enables in terms of police surveillance and things like that. I think that's a really good point. And I want to get more into some of these different angles of it in a second. But let's take a step back. Can you introduce what's happening in Landover to folks that may not be paying attention to it, and so that just set the stage for us a little bit?
Oh, sure. So way back in 2020, Larry Hogan, his motto was "We're open for business." And I think that was very unfortunate for the state as a whole, because that showed where his priorities lied, that he put profits over people every time. So he passed the legislation that basically waived the state's 6% sales and use tax for qualified data centers. And that opened the floodgates, or the doors essentially, for data centers to want to even look at Maryland as a state of residence, or occupancy, where they would operate their business. So once he passed that legislation, the following year in 2021, you have the Prince George's County Council passing a legislation to fast track qualified data centers, which is CB 001 2021. So once they passed that legislation, then they got a 90-day like shovel approval where basically like right to shovel. So as soon as they got the approval, they would be able to break ground within 90 days, basically. So it's unfortunate that that legislation was passed in 2021, but it took a few years, I guess, for the Lerner family, who is the owners of the Landover Mall site, to find a buyer that was a data center. So once they found that buyer in 2024, they proposed Bright Seat Tech Park. And this is a property that has been vacant for over 20 years. So nothing has been there, and there's no dire need in the community for something to go there. Of course, it would be nice to have amenities and things in that space, but there's no reason that a data center has to be the main thing that we provide to the community as a revenue generation stream. So they proposed that to our county planning board back in 2024, and it was approved in April of 2024. So unfortunately, the way the legislation is written, in order to appeal that approval, we would have had to act before 30 days was up. So we missed that kind of window to act on the legislation, I mean, the passing of the approval of the Bright Sea Tech Park. But what we do have working on our side is that we now have a lot of community outreach, and we're working to get more people in the community involved to speak up. So I started a petition in June of this year to help stop the data center from coming to Landover on change.org. And then about a month later, after my petition was created, I was contacted by the Party for Socialism and Liberation to do a reel on Instagram. And once we put the reel on Instagram early September, it literally took off like a wildfire. We have over 300, I think, and 50,000 views currently. And that led to 21,000 plus signatures on the petition currently. So it's really been important to meet people where they are with our campaign. And I think that social media aspect really gave us a little bit of leverage, because after we did the reel, there was a high interest in the county's qualified data center task force meetings, which is a task force that was created by the county council to kind of make a recommendation on whether or not we should move forward with data centers in Prince George's County. So they had a meeting on September 8th, and hundreds of people showed up to that meeting after the reel and petition went viral. And I was very proud of the reel at that point. We held a rally before that qualified data centers task force meeting to kind of list some demands and things that we wanted to see in our community. And I believe the council and the county executive heard our voices, because they put a moratorium on data center approval after that. And we basically have 6 months from September to work on strategy on how we can fully stop the Landover Mall site, as well as the county executive pausing data center approval until the end of the year. So those are two things that are working in our favor currently with the Landover site. The only thing that hinders us, or why I've said in interviews in the past that the moratorium is a bit performative, is specifically for the Landover Mall site. It was approved in 2024. So it would need to be grandfathered into the moratorium, essentially, or brought into the moratorium, because it already is approved. They may have some rights to usage of the land that's already been approved. So we would have to go to court or something to get that project completely stopped. Or the county council can put legislation in to fully stop the project. So those are the
Yes.
options that we have on the table for now.
There's a lot there to digest. I mean, you were speaking
Yes.
about I'm going to have to rewatch this section. Sometimes I do that to make sure I'm expressing the point I want. I'm going to have to rewatch this in order to make sure I'm digesting everything that you're laying out for us. But you speak about of course, the power of community and grassroots organizing and the power of social media. But I think you also mentioned PSL, right? So it's this combination of organized local organizers, social media, and third-party politics, right? And the threat that a third party outside of, and in Baltimore City, where Andy and I live, and Prince George's, it's not really a two-party system. We know that it's a one-party system. I used to live in Prince George's 2005 to 2009, and it's a one-party system in these places. And so you really need a third party at the national or state level, but a second party at the county level. And so can you kind of, when Andy was saying, I'm working with somebody down in Prince George's who's doing this data center work, and then he's like, says your name, I'm like, why does that name sound familiar? So can you talk about kind of how you came to the Green Party and how you came to third party politics in general, and your trajectory, before this most recent fight in which you're doing this amazing work, moving a few years back in your biography?
Oh, sure. After Obama's second term, I was highly upset. I mean, I was disappointed. All of the things that you could think of that you would be when you feel kind of bamboozled by a politician. And I know it's not 100% his responsibility to change the world, but essentially that's kind of the platform that he was running on, that we were going to get this president in and we were going to get health care, we were going to get, better quality of life and all of these things. And none of the things came into play in a way that was positive for us as a people as a whole. Of course, there were people who benefited under Obamacare and under Obama's policies, but when you look at different things outside of America, like nuclear disarmament or the war on terror and things like that, he kind of was on the same lines as everyone else that had come before him. So I was really disappointed. So that's when I started doing research and just kind of like looking up different articles, and that's what led me to Jill Stein and the Green Party. And I had known about the Green Party for years because in elementary school I had a really progressive teacher, shout out to Ed Goulart, who taught us about like Ralph Nader and what was the guy's name? Oh my gosh, it's escaping me right this second. But he ran, I think, with the Green Party maybe in like the 90s. Shoot, it's gonna come back to me. But basically, like I've been learning about the Green Party for a very long time. And when Obama was elected and I voted for him and I didn't get to see the fruits of my labor canvassing and going door knocking, to make sure that this guy was in office, I felt like I needed to reach out to some other parties to see what options could be available. So that's when I really in 2016 got involved with the Green Party. Kamisha Clark ran for Congress with the Green Party back in 2016, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked a lot on her campaign, canvassing for her. And we did really well as a campaign, for her not to be a career politician, getting as much of the vote as she did. I can't remember the exact percentage at this time, but it was well for what we had to work with, budget wise and everything else. So I think that we made a strong impact on the community because a lot of people were wanting to see some change and they wanted something different. So I think that we have a great opportunity now as we're moving forward with the Green Party to just grow the party as a whole. With Party for Socialism and Liberation, they are not a ballot party, a ballot access party. So I would be able to essentially run as like a Party for Socialism and Liberation member and a Green Party member. So that's something that I'm looking forward to in the future, bringing that kind of like um, socialist side of things together because I do feel like a lot of green values are socialist values, of course. So if we just unite, then the movement will be even stronger. So that's kind of where I see it leading in the future. But I've definitely been a left leaning, tree hugging type of person my whole life, and I feel right at home when I found the Green Party because all of the major points that we outline about what we want to see and where we want society to go are things that align with my values.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm class of 2016 here as well, so that's when I came in, and that's why I recognized your name. And so yeah, it's really great to be kind of reconnecting in this way. And just another example, there are so many that disprove the canard that Greens don't organize on local issues, or Greens don't organize for the long haul. It's like, yeah, we do. Look at Taylor. We're doing the work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So the next question is, what are the things people are missing about this issue, like that the media and the mainstream politicians are not talking about? Like, what is that half of the story that is never told?
I think the half that's not being told currently is like the AI bubble portion of it. A lot of non-mainstream media is reporting on it, but your Fox 5 and your ABC, NBC, they're not talking about the AI bubble and how we're on the verge of it bursting, how there are zombie data centers in Loudoun County and Prince William County that don't even have the power capacity to run and operate, but they've been built and the project has been completed, and now it's just sitting there as an empty shell, waiting for the juice essentially to get there. And how do we get to that juice? By returning to fossil fuels. So, it's like that underbelly of like, this is not in a sustainable way. It's not being done in a sustainable way. It's kind of like something I think the media is missing. And I think that we need to spread that message a lot more. Like in 10 to 20 years, most data centers are going to be obsolete that we currently have operating in the US. And we're at over 5,400 data centers. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of space. And then they just want them to get bigger and bigger. Louisiana, they have a project that's, I think, it's either the size of Manhattan or 3 times the size of Manhattan. It's one or the other. but it's a huge facility down in Louisiana that they're trying to build. And it just makes no sense to me that we're not thinking about the long range of it. Like, what are our children going to be experiencing in this country if there's a data center on every block that's hyperscale? Like the particulate matter that's getting put into the air by diesel generators is harming communities already in Memphis. They have increased asthma emergency admittance for children, and children and elderly are going to be the most susceptible to the harms of the pollution. So I think that it's important to protect them because they are the most vulnerable in our communities.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I also think the part of it that is that you and I have talked about some is the amount of fracking money from Western Pennsylvania that is going into a lot of these centers, because fracking demand for fossil fuels is going down as a bunch of renewables come onto the market. And the best way to make sure that there's continued demand for the fracked products that are coming out of Western Pennsylvania and Ohio and those places is to build these huge data centers so that the grid has all of this strain on it. And it's like, I don't know that we'll ever find that Wes Moore and the Democrats have directly taken money from those fracking companies in Windsor, Pennsylvania, but they're certainly taking money from the private equity that is investing in the tech companies, and they're certainly benefiting from a product that is keeping the fracking industry alive in Western Pennsylvania right now. And I think that part of it is really interesting too. We have a fracking we have a fracking ban here in Maryland, but we are pumping gas through the state, and we are powering data centers in the state with the electricity that is generated with that fracked gas. And I think that the AI bubble and the continued preservation of the fracking industry are two things that are really problematic, that are united and kept together by this.
Yep, nope, I completely agree. Amazon is investing $20 billion into Pennsylvania alone, to increase their infrastructure for data center capabilities. And they are on the PJM grid, which is one of the 13 states, including Maryland, DC, and Maryland and Virginia, that is on the PJM grid. So it makes no sense that we're not paying attention to what's happening in our neighboring states, because that electricity is coming from our potential electricity. Maryland, I think, is outsourcing some like 40% of its electricity right now. And if we're putting a hyperscale data center on that, they've already said that they're going to have rolling blackouts possibly in 2027. And this is coming from PJM directly, that there will be blackouts in Maryland in 2027 if we don't do something to increase our energy needs as the demand increases. The data centers that are opening in Virginia on the PJM grid, increasing our electricity costs in Maryland. So it's all tied together. And the more we see that, and create that unity, I think we'll have a better chance at fighting it, because people will be able to kind of rise up against the AI and the big giants.
Yeah, totally. Owen, you got another question?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and also in terms of people feeling it in their pocketbook, right? I mean, commercial utilities are at a lower rate, I think, than residential. Sometimes they, lock in a rate for a longer period of time. So if you're sitting at home and you're pissed off that your electrical bill is going up, this is one of the reasons why. Right. So how can people, and this is one of the ways in which people can become active in addressing the problem both of, land use and these, big, ugly data centers being built in, down the street from them, but also in addressing, the rising costs of electricity and the increasing or maintained dependence on fossil fuels. So Taylor, what can folks do to get involved? What can folks do to organize with you?
Oh, yes. Well, if you want to specifically help with the Landover fight, the first step would be to sign the petition, and sign the petition. If we don't have it linked here, I'll try to send it out to you guys. Maybe you can post it somewhere. But signing the petition really helps, because it shows that we have kind of strength in numbers. The more people that are in opposition of it, the more likely the council members are going to be to listen to us and stopping it completely. And then I would like for people to come out to county council meetings, not just in Prince George's County, Maryland, but wherever you live. If you are fighting a data center there in Frederick County, Montgomery County, Charles County, there's so many places where they're trying to put these data centers within Maryland. and it's all going to impact your neighbor. So if you live in a county where you can speak out against a data center, I urge you to do so, because there are other people who may not have that luxury, if they're living in a part of the state where maybe there is no data center coming to that part of Maryland, but they want their voice to be heard. You can be that voice for them because you reside in a place in close proximity to the proposed location of a data center. The next
Yeah.
thing, oh, go ahead.
Well, Baltimore County, Carroll County, Frederick County, that's where they're building this big, or they're proposing to build this big, high voltage electrical line to bring power from PA down through to the data center alley in Northern Virginia, right? So folks there are up in arms too. I mean, this is one of the few issues that I really see animating folks in rural Maryland, in the suburbs, in urban areas and cities, left, right, blue, red, green, yellow, like everyone is pissed off about the cost of electricity. There are no real solutions on the table from the traditional parties, the corporate funded parties, and everyone's pissed off about the price of electricity. So I think the work that you're doing, and the petition that you're circulating, calling people to county council meetings, it really is a statewide movement that I see building around the work that you're doing.
Yes, and one last quick thing. Just found out that you can actually leave a public comment for the Maryland Public Service Commission, and they actually help to dictate when utilities will be allowed to increase their rates. So I'm encouraging everyone to go on their website and leave a public comment about how you're being impacted by the rate increases that they're allowing, and kind of getting that website out more, or getting that information out more, that you have a right to speak up to the Maryland Public Service Commission, who's in charge of kind of when and where these utilities are allowed to raise their rates. So I did want to kind of mention that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. The PSC, the Public Service Commission, is an important vehicle in determining utility policy in Maryland, whether it is water in Western Maryland or electricity in our parts of the state. It is a key vehicle that the state of Maryland uses in order to make this policy. And for the most part, my take on it is that it has been there to service the corporations first and their shareholders first. And it has been there second to take care of ratepayers and taxpayers in the state of Maryland. And if we become the next governor and lieutenant governor, we're going to make sure that the PSC is there to serve the ratepayers and the taxpayers, and that the corporations and their shareholders are the ones that are having to beg for more money. They have record profits in Pepco and record profits in BG&E, and they are being subsidized by the state of Maryland to raise our rates. And they will say, oh, we're going to tell them they can't do that, but they're going to let them raise their rates. We're going to pay for their infrastructure. And they have been given basically a monopoly on providing electricity in the state recently. So I think the point about the PSC is really important, and it is a place where leverage is necessary. They're not, it's hard to leverage them, but if Ralph Nader taught us anything, it was to find those agencies in government that allow us to bring leverage and bring power to them and get different results out of them. And we can do that from the outside, and hopefully we can do that from the inside as well, because these things require multifaceted strategies. So,
yes.
Taylor, I want to ask, so we're talking about very near-term stuff. There is a data center coming to your community, and you need to do everything you can to stop that data center. The laws have already been written. The deals have already been cut. And so you are fighting at the tail end of something that somebody should have never allowed to happen. But looking forward a little bit, we are working on what our policy is going to be as a campaign, as it relates to data centers, as it relates to AI privacy, as it relates to some of these other things. So if you could take your activist hat off a little bit and put your advocate and your policymaking hat on, what would you like to see state policy be? What can be gained or improved by changes in state policy so that future fights like yours aren't facing such an uphill battle?
Yes, well, we can start with the Renew Act, unveto it, basically make sure that legislation is back on the table, is something that we're evaluating and taking seriously. I'm not privy to all of the details of the Renew Act, but I do know that it's legislation that affects the environment and is good for the environment. And then I would like to see possibly a full ban on hyperscale data centers, because I feel that that's just too much energy consumption, too much land use, too much water use. Like, it's just not good for our communities to have hyperscale data centers. In Prince George's County, we currently have 5 data centers open, but they're all small to mid-sized data centers, way less footprint on the environment and way less impact on the communities. So I think that if we want to see technology grow, that it's okay for AI to grow, but why does it have to be on such a massive, large scale that's going to hurt us all in not having clean water or being able to breathe because we don't have clean air? I'm someone who grew up as an asthmatic. I don't want that for my future children or grandchildren. It's very important to be able to breathe. And if your lungs are pulling in all of this from the outside, it's very hard to work to clean them from the inside. So I think that we have to focus on that when we're looking at um, what we want to do with data centers in our communities going forward. And then I think that we need to take the data centers that are already either like contracted or going to be built regardless, because some of these projects may be so far along in the process when you guys get in office that it's too late to kind of like say, hey, you can't do it without them trying to take you to court. So maybe we need to make sure that the ones that are able to be open are done so sustainably, economically, and not the cheapest, easiest route, because diesel is dirty and it's the cheapest thing they could use when we know that you can use renewable sources to power data centers, but it just costs more upfront.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about the point that you just make is that it makes very clear that you are not anti-technology. You're not even anti, like, get AI, right? But it is these billion-dollar, trillion-dollar corporations that are opening these mass-scale commercial data centers that are there, not because they're trying to help the community, but because they help the bottom line of the shareholders of those corporations. And they help them to be able to build their surveillance tools that they can then hand over to the government in order to make sure that we're all being watched. I would love to see a Maryland where we were thriving with sustainable local technology companies that were plugged into an infrastructure of local sustainable data centers so that we were able to offer a product that could compete with these big trillion-dollar corporations that are trying to rule the world. And we could say, this is how Maryland does it. Maryland isn't trying to be one place where Facebook can extract some more electricity from. We're trying to build a place that builds an alternative that is more ethical, more rooted in community, and owned by the people in the community, using data centers that are regulated like infrastructure as pieces of the democratic engine of the economy. And I love that you make that point, because I think it really stresses that this is not some regressive, like, Luddite approach to the technology. It's a recognition that the technology is coming and that people in Maryland are going to use it, but it is naming the enemy as the trillion-dollar tech corporations, the private equity that is funding these data centers, the fracking companies that are benefiting from it, and the politicians who are getting the donations and the kickbacks from all of these people who are also trying to profit off of it. And I think that clarity about what the actual problem is will make this a lot more salient when we're talking to people who aren't Greens, who don't know who Ralph Nader is, who didn't vote for Jill Stein, right? Like, we need to reach a lot of people with this point. And I think that clarity that you have about what the problem is really going to help us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as I'm listening, I'm thinking, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, the problem wasn't necessarily the factory, it was who owned the factory, right? And so if we can control the means of data production and own data centers, then that is part of the solution. It's about who owns data, whose data is being exploited, who has privacy and sovereignty over their data, and who's profiting from it. That's a big part of this question, I think.
Yeah, and to Michelle's point in the chat about fracking, Maryland had a choice a couple of years ago about whether to have a moratorium on fracking or a ban on fracking. And the Hogan administration led the right decision, which was a ban on fracking. And I think that sets up well the context for what we're talking about with these data centers, these mass scale, hyperscale commercial data centers that are enriching trillion-dollar companies. I think you're right. I think we should ban them. I don't think that we should come up with some fancy technocratic scheme in order to try to tax them or try to regulate them. We can do that with the smaller ones, but with the big ones that are serving these big corporations, Amazon and Plantier and all of these folks, let's just say Maryland is not open to that kind of business.
Exactly. Because it's not like a hyperscale data center is going to cure cancer. A hyperscale data center from Amazon is purely there to track your shopping habits, to track your spending habits, to market and promote items to you. It's to create, you are now the part of the product, they're tracking you. So they're not solving the mystery of life in these data centers, So I think that that's very unfortunate. And Ross Perot was who I was trying to say earlier. Sorry, it came to me.
Yeah. And I mean, Ross Perot was able to get on the debate stage in those elections and make a point that resonated with a lot of Marylanders. And when we get on that debate stage next year or next year in the fall, when we force MPT to allow us and the other third-party candidates on the debate stage, it's going to change the way that this debate occurs on that stage, because they're going to ask whatever generic Republican is nominated what he feels, and they're going to ask Wes Moore what he feels, and they're both going to say it's complicated, but we need to embrace this technology and we need the jobs, and they're actually not going to be that different on what they say, because they both are taking that money from the private equity, the tech, and the fracking companies that want to see these things built, and they're both working in concert with the county politicians who also want to get that money. So when we get on that debate stage, we're going to be able to say, let me tell you the story of Taylor Frazier McCollum and how she stopped the Landover data center, and how that's the kind of leadership we need, not random Republican, whoever they nominate, and Wes Moore standing up there talking about how complicated it is. It's not actually that complicated. It's pretty straightforward. We don't want these things here. They're not good for Maryland, and we need people like you leading that fight in the meantime, so that we can get in office and we can put the ban in place. We can make sure the legislature puts the ban in place, so all of us can, I don't know, go do something else. We can go to brunch or something, right?
Yes.
No. Taylor, I think it's so great to have you here, and I would love to have you come back on the show at some point later in order to have more conversation about this, to dig deeper. I know you went into some really good trainings, and you're really connecting to the national movement about this. So if you'd like, let us know. We'd love to have you come back on. And if there's anybody in the chat who would love this or would like to see us have Taylor on more, please let us know. I just love the way that you tell this story. I love the way you're leading this fight, and we're excited to have you on. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this up tonight?
Oh no, just it's been a pleasure. If you want to follow the movement at PSLDC or at No Landover Data on Instagram, and thank you guys for having me, and I'll definitely be back.
Thank you, Taylor. We appreciate it. Have a good night. I know you had a busy day, multiple speaking engagements, multiple bits of activism. The life of an activist is stressful, but it is good work that you're doing. We're happy to be able to share the story with folks, and thank you for coming on, and we'll have you back soon.
Yes. All right. Well, you guys take care. Have a good night.
All right.
Bye,
thank
Taylor.
you. All right, so I'm Owen. I'm really excited we got to do that interview. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and it was everything that I had hoped it would be. She's just doing a great job marshaling the facts in order to fight this uphill battle.
Mm-hmm. Building coalitions, including in the typical and directly affected folks, but also bringing in new coalition members. So I love to see it. She's rad.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and I think as I said, look forward to us having a data center and digital privacy policy coming out pretty soon. I think it's important stuff for us to be talking about. And I think there's really good ways to look at this from a green futurist perspective, where we look at how do we become the way that we control the means of the tech production. How do we have cooperative technology economies that are helping Marylanders who are into this stuff and are good at this stuff without having them to go work for these evil trillion-dollar corporations or sell their labor or sell their businesses to those corporations. So I think there's a lot of space to talk about in this. We got to help Taylor win this fight first. She got to win this fight, stop that data center from coming to Landover. Then we've got to develop a policy, get on the debate stage, share those ideas, and build a movement around it. But then at the same time, I think we can be having this conversation about what does a tech economy look like in our world, where there's cooperative ownership of the means of production, where the state has a democratic stake in the way that utilities and infrastructure are regulated, and in where we are not all just there to serve the robots that the trillion-dollar tech companies want to have take our jobs and then make us work for.